moving on, I want to jump over to the Chevy Bolt. All right, and the EUV, and kind of just, we have a Chevy Bolt here in our studio by one of our team members, and he's in love with that car. He and I are constantly battling Tesla Bolt, and he usually wins, because he's always researching, where the advantages are. And the last one that I lost was the range issue. This whole range that, Tesla had expected range, from the analysis versus where the Chevy Bolt actually, held through on the range. You got a chance to drive the EUV though. Tell me about your first experience. I got a chance to watch the video. You look like you really enjoyed it. What were your thoughts on that car?
Yes, I actually was not a huge fan of the older Bolt. It felt like very much like an economy car. Like it had the tinny doors, like it just felt like, tuna can doors, and it just felt like you're driving like a Nissan Versa, kind of a $10,000 product that costs $30,000 because it's electric. That's the way I felt about it. The one I drove a couple weeks ago in Los Angeles was not like that at all. There was some damping in the door. There was some materials. The materials generally were higher quality, more soft touch. The seats were kind of I think maybe not like a vegan leather probably, but perforated vegan leather. And just the overall feeling of being in that car felt like more of a mid-premium tier kind of a car, which is important if you're going to sell it for $30,000. And I think that was part of the mismatch before with the older Bolt. So I think the improvements are pretty vast in that regard. Visually as well, I thought they did a good job with it, especially the EUV. I honestly think they could have just made the EUV and gotten rid of the other version of it.
Interesting. Okay.
I think they're going to sell more of those. Yeah, it's a little bit it's a little bit bigger. Seats people a little bit better, and I think that just the general proportions fill out a little bit more on that model. But they're similar, and the EUV I think is going to be probably their best seller until their Ultium based cars roll off the line. Because you got to remember that the Bolt is still very much it's called the last of the old way, which is their platform that they use, the prismatic cells from LG that they use. All that stuff was like their first take at it, and this really is, let's refresh it, let's make it a little bit better to sell it for a few years until our real in-house Ultium based tech rolls off the line. So to that end, I thought it was a smart business move, and I think it's going to be a good bridge car until they have some more of their newer stuff that comes out.
Yeah. What car do you feel kind of pairs up with the EUV if you were car shopping today and you had the EUV in one hand, and it could be a nice car, or I don't know that there's really an EV that would pair up to that right now, because I don't think I would put the Model 3 up against that. What are your thoughts on that? Okay, yeah. All right, there you
Possibly
go.
Kona. Maybe the EUV probably has a little more room than the Kona does. One thing I was disappointed with was that it doesn't have a front trunk, the frunk.
I saw that, yeah.
Electric vehicle owners, we're used to that, and it's a pretty important aspect. I could fit like an airline luggage in the front of my car, which means, so like in my Model 3, I have a subfloor where like the spare tire or gas tank used to go. I can put like an airline luggage piece in there. I can put a travel stroller in the front. Suddenly my little sedan packs a pretty punch in terms of cargo space. So in the case of the Bolt, they have the subfloor, which was great, a lot of room down there, but the front trunk was just like a normal car, kind of like you can see all the wires and like the motors and stuff. Yeah, all the electronics and stuff.
So your thoughts on the fact that you have the Bolt and the EUV, you're thinking that they'll eventually just stop making the Bolt, is that right?
Or if they keep that Bolt nameplate, I think it'll just be the new platform. Like it'll be built with Ultium batteries. It'll be like all new. This was just a refresh. It was the same chassis, same platform, just a kind of a sheet metal upgrade, kind of a mid-cycle refresh, right, if you will. So if they do keep the name Bolt, which I think they should, the Bolt it actually beat the Model 3 in terms of like mass market 200 plus mile range EV. If they do that, it'll just be on the new platforms that they built.
Yeah, yeah. What about the fit and finish of the car? Interior design, what were your thoughts on it? Your response on, Did you like the display? Do you like all the knobs? Do you like the interface, the UI, responsiveness, all those kind of things?
So I've gotten used to my Tesla. Like I'll say the minimalistic, just single screen. I have
Yeah.
I can use it just fine. But at the same time, if you're gonna put knobs and stuff, I'm not opposed to it if it works. And the climate controls were all right where they needed to be, and I thought that was well laid out. They had nice little rockers for the controls. I actually thought that was nicer than the Mach E, which had on-screen controls, but
Right.
it was just a little bit maybe more finicky and also maybe more difficult to reach. But the screen, the infotainment screen, that is still very much legacy car maker.
Yeah.
I bring my kids on these reviews when I drive cars because my son has this. He loves our Tesla. To him, there's like Tesla cars because he can watch Netflix while we
Yeah.
charge or something.
Sure.
And then there's everything else. So in the video at the end, if you noticed, he says that. He says, GM, you should add Netflix. He literally told him that in the video. And I think what's interesting is, as a kid's perspective, that's part of the fun. If you're going to get an electric car, it's like when you bought your first iPhone, you showed off
Yeah.
like all the cool stuff about it. If you got an iPhone or like a smartphone that just had all the same old things, it's kind of a weird mismatch. So I think that's a great opportunity for them to invest in an entire new UI because it has the old legacy mapping. I used Apple CarPlay, and so if you have that, that's okay. But if you were to use like the built-in map, it was really annoying. It was missing the points of interest. In fact, it was missing the point of interest for the place we were driving to for that event.
Okay.
Whereas my iPhone, which gets updates over the air all the time, is always up to date, right? So I think what they should probably do is they should invest in something like Tesla, where they have a really nice interface for the entire like media and controls that you can update over the air to keep it refreshed and kind of feeling new. I remember Tesla had a holiday update a couple months ago, and it just felt like a different car for a while, and that's a nice touch, which other companies haven't really followed suit with.
Yeah.
So I'd say
the
fit and finish was nice, controls were good, but still some room for improvement in terms of like that feeling of being special in there.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So the price point on their launch edition up around $43K. I mean, now you're getting into Model E or Model 3 territory. Do you think they can push it, especially with the EUV? Do you think they can push it into that over 40K number and win, or do you feel like that might be a holdback for GM in terms of maybe they've overpriced this vehicle?
Yeah. So do you know what the launch edition comes with? I'm kind of curious because they don't really have dual motor variations or rear motor.
To me, maybe some trim, and that was kind of the extent of it. But I think it's early access, just the whole early access point.
Yeah, because they're going to have, they're going to have a mid-30s model as well, and I think that's where they're going to be competitive. Because they mentioned like the base models are going to be 31, 33 for the regular Bolt and the EUV, and at those prices, I think they win. At 40 something, now we're talking about like Mach E, Model 3, Model Y, and I think that's going to be a tougher sell for them. So I think for them, they really need to try to get that price to be in a different kind of category.
Yeah. GM's going to cover the charging cost if you buy one of these cars, so you kind of get a little bit of a bump there. That was another one.
The home charger?
Yeah, the home charger. So actually putting it in for you. Yeah. So I think
that's
that
a really smart move.
Yeah, it's a good adoption thing when you got those people, because that's for some people, even though it's really simple, for anybody that's watching this, that considering an EV, this is easy to do at your house. If you have a garage and access to a breaker box, it's not a hard thing to do. But that I thought was a really good thing. The thing that I think is interesting to me, and I think this will be where it separates, because GM and the Bolt especially, is in their performance on their range. Their range estimates are pretty accurate and considerably higher than that of the Teslas when you go to real life range. If people really start to push the, kind of push the issue on that, do you feel like that could be a separator for Chevrolet in people making a decision to go that way?
Yeah, this is another video that I'm planning right now, talking about electric vehicle range. I'll say this. The thing with Tesla is their range numbers aren't way off. If you drive like if you had a Prius.
Yeah.
I have a dual motor 500 horsepower performance Model 3. If you
Right.
floor it, you're not going to get 300 miles of range. Like, it shouldn't
Exactly.
surprise you. But I'll say the reason why I love electric cars so much is when I remember growing up as a kid, I got this old M3, and it was like this incredible car, but it had horrible gas mileage compared to my car before that. So I was always thinking, why can't they build a gas car that is fun when you want to be, and then when you're just going 70 on the freeway, can deliver on 40 miles a gallon? That's what electric cars can do. So even though I have a 500 horsepower dual motor electric vehicle, when I'm just cruising on the freeway, I get pretty good efficiency. Like, that was never possible before. But what I think ends up happening is most Tesla owners, they floor it. Like, you're enjoying your car. You drive it like you have a BMW M3 or a Audi, A4 or something. And those guys typically don't get the range that they think they'll get either. So whereas like the Bolt is very much, it's a front wheel drive, more of an economy car. So I didn't find the temptation to just kind of floor it randomly. I drove it like I would drive a front wheel drive hatchback. So there's that part of it. There's also, I think what Tesla should start to do, and I think everyone should start to do, is have highway and freeway miles broken out. Because when you say 300 miles of range, what are you talking about? Are you talking about like, will I get 500 if I drive 45 miles an hour, like on a back road? Or is it 300 at 45 on a back road and 200 at 80 miles an hour on the freeway, which actually probably was closer to that. I did a poll on Twitter, by the way, asking what Tesla owners got in terms of efficiency.
The range?
And yeah, so if you break it down for what Tesla is claiming, if you get 250 watt hours per mile, meaning you use about 250 watt hours per every mile driven, that means you can go about 4 miles per kilowatt hour. That's how you get to about 300 miles of range. And surprisingly, most people were far above that. Now, cold weather changes things. If you drive up elevation, all that kind of stuff. So there's other factors. And EVs are just more sensitive because they're so efficient. When you're getting like 90% efficient operation and you have to cool or heat, or you go up a 5-degree grade, the difference is massive compared to a terribly inefficient gas car, which is already really inefficient. And then now you're going up a little bit of a grade and you're a little bit less efficient. But the delta is just massive on EVs, how much of an impact it has. So I think there's some things that we can do in terms of maybe highway and city, breaking out range. And also just generally having more sources. Like, for example, I work with Tesla. I'm a user of Tesla. And they have data on this. They show you like what average users get. So make sure to use that. And also, if you're an EV buyer, always prioritize range. Like, don't worry about full self-driving. Like, if you're on the fence, get the long range variant of whatever model you're looking at. That's going to be the greatest feature you're ever going to have. You can drive a car yourself, but if you're getting 200 miles and then now it's cold and, the 80-20 rule, meaning you don't charge it to full or back, suddenly your 200 mile range EV is a 100-mile car. So range is still very much king.
The data that was put out from Inside EVs, they had a breakout on cost per mile. The Bolt EV came in at number one at $124. If you think about it on your cost per mile range against the cost of the car, which was $31,900. The Tesla Model 3 long range, $47,100, $134. Then it went to the EUV on the Bolt, which is the base model, I think the one you're talking about, which was $33,395 at $136. Those are all, I think now you're talking about Tesla is even in there in the hunt with best cost per mile, for value proposition. But GM has, some great, I mean, they're basically 3 out of the top 4 on this thing. So my question would be, when you look at, you've had a chance to drive the EUV, you've seen the GM build quality, you've seen the interface, the software, all of that. If you were to say, okay, GM is going to be in this game for a long time, or do you think GM has got a ways to go before they really can rival some of these EV makers, such as, obviously Tesla being the case here, but there's others that are coming?
Great question. So I will say, when I was driving the car, I really liked how they programmed the pedal feel for the accelerator and the brake pedal. That was my gripe with the Mach-E. I found that the pedal programming, especially in the first 10 or 15% of the accelerator pedal and the brake pedal, needed some work. It felt very coggy. It wasn't linear and smooth. Tesla is king at this. My car,
Yeah, they're perfect.
I always joke, like I could drive around and you wouldn't even spill a drop of water in a cup that was to the brim, because I just have such control with that foot. So the Bolt showed more refinement there. I think GM does have a winner here. The key is going to really be about how you can make sure that you make a desirable product. Because if you're telling me, okay, hey, here's this economic vehicle and it's only $124 per mile, well, sure, but I can get a Chevy Trax for $18,000 or Nissan Kicks or something like that and have infinite range and 5-minute fill-ups. So that is where you end up losing. I think what you need to do is you got to be desirable. That's what Tesla has done such a great job of. You tell me that I have a performance 500 horsepower monster car that has no maintenance requirement. That is just a winning, and it looks beautiful. All the Teslas are beautiful cars. There's no exception to that. So what they need to do is try to figure out what can we do that is just kind of like mind-blowingly awesome. I think the UI, having your own kind of operating system for the screen like Tesla does, is the first starting point. The second one, I think, is that kind of economy hatchback size is, again, it's not the most desirable product category. So why don't you go after, like, for example, Paul, tell me, would you buy a C9 Corvette EV with dual motors and 800 horsepower? And what I mean is, like, get a halo car. Do something that gets people excited to think, hey, look at this, like, holy smokes, right? To put GM into that kind of a category. Or maybe like a big Escalade EV, which they're going to do that. But those things, I think, are where you can start to really win over the hearts and minds. Because as long as you have a cheaper non-EV, you're always, and until you stop making that, people are going to go, okay, Bolt EV at 33 or the Chevy Trax at 22. And how do you win that, right? The only way is if it's like cool, like, oh, it drives itself, which the EUV will have Super Cruise, but that sort of thing.
Well, I think when you look at GM and what their moves have been, I mean, up front, I think a lot of people look at GM and the fact that they're in the EV space a little bit more, I think a little bit more solid than some of the other automakers. But at the same time, I would agree with you. I think they don't have that icon car like Ford, which really went after using the icon car being the Mustang and trying to come out with one that people would look at being the Mach-E, and really kind of moving in that direction. And then with Ford's partnership with Rivian, especially on, when you go to trucks and where that market's going to go, Ford may actually be the sleeper here with EV, especially when you look at where the Mach-E is and their relationship with Rivian and what it could be for that Ford F-150, which is the #1 selling truck on the planet, versus GM over here playing in the world of the EUV and not really making, I mean, why wouldn't they have done this with the Camaro, to really go head to head with the Mach-E? That would be an interesting one.
Call it a Camaro, make it a crossover. I talked about this. So here's my take on this one. This is going to be pretty interesting, but with Ford, what Ford did is they said, okay, we're really not retooling entire factories. We're not building a new platform. We're not manufacturing our own cells. But if we're going to do this, let's make the most appealing car possible. Step one, call it a Mustang, right?
Right.
Which is polarizing because for hardcore Mustang fans, they kind of hate it and they think, what is it?
That's a little offensive.
It's almost sacrilegious, right?
Yeah.
And then two, make it look gorgeous, right? So this is the opposite of GM. We're very humble with the Bolt. But the Mach-E is a beautiful car. We drove it around. I had the Mach-E as well for a couple of days. People were like rolling their windows down and like honking their horns and giving us like high thumbs ups, and we got a lot of attention. It was a red Mach-E, to be fair. Whereas in my Tesla, they're so common now. I blended. Nobody even notices me in my Tesla. I disappear because a white Tesla Model 3 is like a Toyota Corolla a couple years ago. But the Mach-E is really cool. But what I doubt is, how seriously Ford is investing. Like, you partner with Rivian or you invest $700 million in Rivian. But as far as their own approach, I think it's not nearly as impressive as what GM is doing. So I think right now, I think the Mach-E is going to outsell this thing because it's very attractive.
Sure.
And people who want EVs and don't want Teslas will flock that way. They'll sell well too, but I think GM long-term has a better plan. They're going to manufacture their own lithium-ion cells, which Ford is not even close to that. Plus, they're going to build platforms upon which the cells are going to integrate. They're going to just make one type of pouch, this one size of battery, and you put it in this configuration, you have an SUV. You put it in this configuration, you have a sedan. You put it in this configuration, you have the Hummer. You know, they're introducing the Hummer SUV, EV, right? I think in April 3rd. So long term, I think GM's going to win out. I just hope that they can get themselves a halo product sooner than later. And I don't think the Bolt EUV, as technically sound and practical as it is, I don't think it has that desirability, let's call it coefficient, that like the Mach-E has.
Yeah, I think you're on to something there, and that's the big question right now. If you know, people playing in the stock of, you know, knowing which OEM or which, you know, ICE manufacturer is going to become the player that kind of breaks out of this, because there will be a winner. There's going to be a winner, and if it is GM, I think you're right. Maybe GM is, you know, they're preparing for some pretty interesting things. I love their battery technology. If it actually comes to light in that format, you know, where it's basically Legos for batteries. Which will be fun to, you know, to see how that kind of applies into a manufacturing system like what GM has to do. So, man, this has been great, Ricky. Amazing stuff. I love kind of picking your brain here. Great interview. Thank you so much for joining us today here on TechPath.
Could I mention one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Hit it up.
Sure, you can cut this out if, you know. But the final part of this, and, you know, you mentioned Warren's models about Tesla stock going forward. I think the great mistake people make when talking about Tesla stock is overvaluing FSD, which, like, if you look forward 10 years, full self-driving is a commodity. Every car will have it. It'll be worth nothing. It'll just be built in. Like,
that's my argument. I am with you on that.
It's not a thing.
Yeah, it goes up for a while the technology is being developed. Sure.
But eventually, like, for example, you can buy an Android phone for like $100, like a quad-core Snapdragon with 4 gigs of RAM for $100, because they're utterly commoditized. The same will happen there. So, but I'm still bullish on Tesla stock. I'm a shareholder in Tesla because, to me, the really important part is they buy cells at the cheapest price of any OEM, and it's because of that gigafactory that they have. So they buy cells at a price that is cheaper than anybody else. So if you're going to look at who's going to sell EVs best, well, it'll be the company that makes the most gross margins on it, which is Tesla. So I think up next, GM. I think if the Ultium works out the way they're expecting it to, and they're able to get the chain in-house and just be able to crank this one style of battery out like they're talking about at a scale that rivals any other player, GM could be the second company that makes cars. People have questioned if the Mach-E is even profitable, how much Ford is actually paying, because is the platform in-house? Is it on something Rivian's building? I don't fully know the details there, but they might be paying a lot of money and the margins might be tiny. Whereas, you know, the Model Y is making Tesla a ton of money. So the margins here are crucial for which OEM survive. If you're making EVs at a huge margin and your business is doing great, you're going to be around. And even if you have a great car, but your margins aren't enough to keep yourself in business, you're probably not going to make it.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, Tesla's margins have continued, even though this last quarter earnings number, their margins kind of softened lightly, but in reality, it stayed pretty much the same. And when you're at a 20 to 30% margin on an automobile, that's pretty impressive. But it does go back to your point, and this is the one that Kathy Wood is kind of talking about all the time, and that is that autonomy, full self-driving, all that, they believe, a lot of the investors, pundits that are really looking at Tesla, believe that's where the potential real upside could be. And if in fact, I mean, if you're in software, you know there is that curve. It's that curve that is the bell curve of where software and technology, unless you're releasing something that's just really innovative. If you're continuously iterating, and you can't really put it past Elon because his brain is moving at a pace in which is not earthly. So it's very possible that he could maintain value at that pace, but I just don't know how much further you could take it. I think where it's going to play out is in the services that these companies could jump into. We did a video on this very issue of if robotaxi turned into a robo delivery fleet. and globally it was about, a $2.3 trillion business for them. That's a pretty good slice of pie. That would be a slice of pie we could love to eat.
Yeah, absolutely. But with any industry, if there is money to be made, the free market abhors a vacuum, and you can guarantee that competitors will rise up. I don't think anyone expected Android to be ready to ship with that T-Mobile T1, that first Android phone, a year after the iPhone. That shocked me. I thought that would be 5 years later, and it wasn't even a year. So that's kind of the nature of competition. There's a lot of smart people in this world, and there's a lot of smart tech people working on this problem from a lot of different angles. So that really is, that's the game, right?
Well, and you're right. I think it's what a great time to be living, in the sense of seeing this innovation and iteration occurring. We don't know what we don't know. And you're right, the amount of George Hotzes that are out there that are just reinventing all sorts of things. There's, possibly 100 young Elons right now running around with ways to get a sustainable tech future that's going to be pretty amazing. So I just think we're in a very cool time, and it's going to be fun to watch for sure. So I got to keep a track on 2-Bit Da Vinci. For all of you listeners, viewers, if you guys have not subscribed to Ricky's channel, you gotta check him out. He's doing a great job over there, and we want to thank you for stopping in today for sure.
I appreciate that, and look forward to being back on. We'll talk about the progress maybe later in the year or something.
I can't wait. That's going to be a good one. That's for sure.
All right. Thank you so much, Bob. Appreciate it.
You bet. See you, man. All right, so all you guys wrapping up, maybe you're over on the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, or right here on YouTube. Make sure and smash the like button. Give us a little bit of feedback if you want to in the comments. We'd love to kind of hear your input on where you think we should go with content, and also some of the interviews we do. We bring in CEOs, thought leaders, and really kind of innovators across AI, tech, EV, and kind of this new phase of where technology is moving. That's what TechPath is about. And of course, you can always email us, which is just producer@revernetworks.com, or hit me up on Twitter @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.